Welcome back to the shop and to the channel. Well, we are finally going to make some significant progress on rebuilding this South Bend 13-inch lathe. I just haven't had a whole lot of time to be able to devote to starting this because I know it's going to be a pretty big project. I want to start by taking all of the major components apart, but this is going to be a lot of work. Well, that wasn't so bad. That didn't take much time at all. Well, that's it for this video. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next one. What's that? People want to see. They want to see how I took it apart. Okay. I mean, I see other YouTubers do that all the time where they tell you what they're going to make, and then the next thing you see is a part that they made. They never show how they made it. So I figured maybe that's how we're supposed to do it. Well, anyway, I do want to start by giving a special shout out and thank you to the folks at Super Clean. They reached out to the channel and wanted to know if I wanted to try their products. So they sent some over, and I'm going to use it to give the lathe a bit of a clean as we're taking it apart. Thanks, Super Clean. Well, aside from trying to give this thing a little bit of a bath as we go, my goal here for this first video really is just to take this thing down into its major components. Take the tailstock off, get the saddle and the cross slide compound off, the apron, the headstock, get the bed lifted off of the chip tray and the legs and the motor, and the motor housing, that is, and we'll see how far we can get. But I will devote individual videos to some of these other components as we go. While this certainly isn't a major component, that is the tool post, but I do want to kind of get it out of the way. In hindsight, I probably should have just left this compound on here. It might have actually been easier, but to remove this, there's a couple of set screws on either side on the cross slide, and you just remove those. There's a couple of wedged dowel pins that hold the compound in. And once the set screws are removed, you can just kind of rock the compound back and forth, and it'll eventually work its way out of the bore that it's mounted in. Using some more Super Clean here to clean up the top of the cross slide and the saddle. This lathe is quite the mess. It is pretty gummed up with dried oil. I don't think any of this is grease. At least it doesn't appear to be grease, but it is pretty rough. I probably shouldn't have been using it as I have been over the last year, sparingly, but probably shouldn't have been using it at all because it is pretty nasty. I was spraying it down with some penetrating oil and using some whey oil on the ways, but this stuff is pretty nasty. It's going to take a lot of work to get this clean. I'm hoping here that the Super Clean is going to at least give me a good jump start on it. While I'm at it, I'm going to go ahead and clean this end of the bed. The dried up oil that's sitting between the valleys in the V-ways is pretty nasty, but the Super Clean is doing a pretty good job of getting it getting it started to break down. I am using a brass brush to help scour it a little bit, but I'm going to need to get this thing all cleaned up anyway, so might as well let it drip down into the chip tray than all over the shop floor. I'm going to be taking the saddle and the apron off here in a bit, and because I don't want to end up breaking it, I'm going to take the thread dial off of the side of the carriage. I've got the carriage moved down closer to the foot end of the bed. I need to remove that support for the lead screw in order to get the apron off. So I've got some wooden cribbing here that I'm trying to block up the apron to keep it elevated. So when I take off that lead screw support, it doesn't sag down and end up bending the lead screw and end up creating more problems for me later. The apron is attached to the underside of the saddle using 4 large Philister head screws. Now there's happens to be one missing here on this lathe, so I'll have to make a replacement. With the apron detached from the saddle, it's really just a matter of moving it along the lead screw to the right, and it will come off the foot end of the lathe. Well, before I can take the saddle off of the bed, I need to remove these 4 screws that hold the saddle gib up underneath it, and this basically keeps the saddle from pulling up off of the back of the lathe. With that saddle gib off now, it just lifts straight up off of the bedways, and I'll go store this someplace until I'm ready to start taking it apart. Next, I'm going to try to get the headstock off of the bed here, but I want to start with removing some of the stuff that's on the back, this upper guard that covers the spindle and the main drive gear that comes off of the back of the spindle. I know the lighting back here in this corner sucks, but it's the best I can do at the moment. But the next thing I can take off here is this bracket that holds a couple of change gears, also called a banjo. There's just a nut that holds onto it that attaches it to the input shaft to the quick change gearbox. My older South Bend lathe does not have this little chip guard on the front of the headstock, so that little cavity on the other lathe has a tendency to get filled in with a lot of chips and oil. The headstock is attached to the bedways with a couple of clamping studs, one here on the back and one near the front. These were in here pretty tight, and I ended up using a dead blow here to at least get it loosened, and that was a little more difficult than I anticipated. One advantage of having a laced belt on a lathe like this is to remove it. I just need to find where the laces match and pull the pin, and the belt comes off. I really do prefer having a leather belt on this lathe, and I will definitely be putting one back on. Whether it's this one or I buy a replacement is still a decision I have not yet made. I probably should have grabbed the engine hoist to get this off because this thing was a little heavier than I remember the other one being. But then again, I think the other one I took it apart before I took it off. I am pretty happy with how well the Super Clean is breaking down the oil. This is a pretty good choice for what I'm doing here, and I am glad that I am doing a little bit of this cleanup now rather than waiting until it's all the way apart. On these lathes that are a total loss lubrication system, meaning that just about every bit of oil that you put into them comes out of them, wherever there's any kind of a horizontal or pseudo horizontal surface, they get covered in oil, and of course the oil attracts the dirt, and you end up with this filthy mess when you don't take care of your machines. That's why it's important really to spend some time when you're done with your project of not just sweeping up the chips, but also wiping down the machine itself and cleaning off any oil, and then making sure that things are lubricated that need to be lubricated, and those things that should be clean of grime and oil are clean. The quick change gearbox is held on to the bedways with a few screws that come in from the top. Now these were not accessible until after I removed the headstock. Well, working by myself, I have to be a bit creative in how I take things apart and put them back together. Here I'm just kind of using my knee and I guess my body weight to hold the gearbox up a little bit while I remove these screws. Well, with this last screw here now disconnected from the gearbox, I can pick it up and carry it over to the shelf where this is going to be for a while. Well, I think this Super Clean foaming spray might be a good option here for inside of the bedways here underneath the headstock. I think this stuff is primarily meant for stuff like engines, but it'll certainly work, I hope, in an environment like this. Well, this direction switch is attached to the back of the bed, and since the bed's going to be coming off next, this has to come off now. I'm probably not going to put this back on. If I do, it's not going to be to hold the power switch. I think what I might consider doing is using it to mount a DRO display. The Super Clean foaming spray did a really good job of cleaning up the outside of the bed and a little bit on the inside. Some of it I couldn't reach. But I am now to the point where it's time to remove the bed and get this lifted up off of the legs and the motor housing. Now the bed on this lathe is a little different than the 1942. It's got a lot more webbing in the middle. They're thinner, but there's more of them. And I think this will be a little bit easier to lift and to get it to lift balanced. I think the other bedway, I could do it, but it was a little trickier. I think this might end up being a little bit easier. The leg on the foot end of the lathe is connected to the bedway itself, and as soon as I lift that thing off, it might be a little bit loosey and tippy. So what I'm going to do here is I've got this piece of oak that's off of an old park bench, and I'm going to clamp it to the leg and sort of wedge it up against the motor housing, and this should keep this thing from wanting to tip in onto onto the floor. I don't think it'll tip backwards, but there is a chance it could tip forward, and this should prevent that. There are 4 bolts up here on the headstock end of the bed that attach it to the motor housing. On the foot end of the bed here, there's a leveling device, and we'll get into that in a later video. But the bed is attached to it, and this leveling device is then attached through the chip tray into those legs. With all of those bolts removed now, I can start lifting up on the bed. I do think now that this is going to be a little bit off balance because of that leveling device is going to put a little bit extra weight here on the foot end. So it might not be perfectly balanced. And I wasn't able to get the engine hoist over the center of the bed, so it's going to be a little bit off kilter. I'm going to have to raise this up and make a couple of adjustments before I can get it all the way down. Well, I made a quick adjustment to that strap, and I think I've got this bed pretty well balanced. I'm happy with this. So I can get this all the way up in the air and then get it back down on the ground as fast as possible. To make this thing a lot easier to move around in the shop while I'm working on it, I picked up a couple more of these 4-wheeled furniture dollies, I think they're referred to as. So we'll get the bed set on it, and this will let me move it out of the way. I'm going to put this super clean foaming spray to the test here on this chip tray. We're going to try to get this as clean as I can get it, or at least as clean as it will be until I start stripping all the paint off of it. Well, the Super Clean does a really good job. I think that is definitely quite the transformation from what I started with. With this thing now reasonably clean, I can go ahead and remove the other 2 bolts that hold it onto the motor housing. Well, that really is going to be it for this week. That was a lot more work than I thought it was going to be. I was hoping to get a little further along than I did. Well, over the next series of videos, I'm going to take each of these major components then apart even further so that they can be cleaned, any repair work done, and then I'll repaint them. I'll do the painting off camera because I don't really think most people find that interesting. But I definitely have my work cut out for me. Well, thanks for watching. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to leave a comment down below. Let me know what you think. Let me know what you would like to see as I go to repair this thing and get it put back together. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.